One of the issues when we talk about justice in society, sometimes we get a little euphemistic about just what that means. But issues of justice dominate the political and social agendas of our society. And in the United States, it may take the form of a healthcare debate. And in Canada, it takes a Truth and Reconciliation Commission process. There are needs for coming to terms, or there is a need to come to terms with our history, with our participation, and to speak a word of truth to our present context. That is what we can do together, and we can do it confessionally by embracing the Belhar and its teaching on those very same issues.
I am sort of easily moved to someone else's pain or plight, but I don't always understand, being a person who comes from the background that I come from. I'm a relatively wealthy, American, white, middle class, pretty educated person, and I come to all of my conversations from that place because that's who I am. But the Belhar calls me to know and bear one another's burdens, bear the burdens of the people in my community by first finding out what those burdens are.
I moved to our Navajo reservation 7 years ago, and for 3 years my family and I lived in a hogan out on a sheep camp in a very remote part of the reservation. The hardest part about being out there was the immense loneliness and sense of being forgotten that we felt from the rest of the country. And I, for years, was searching for a way to communicate the pain that I was feeling as I began to identify more with my community. And finally, the way that I began to express this pain was I said, living on the Navajo reservation feels like I am an old grandmother, and I have a very large and a very beautiful house. And years ago, some people came into my house and they took me upstairs into the bedroom and they locked me up there. And the thing that hurts me the most is that nobody comes up to my room and says thank you for letting them be in my house. And most of the people who are in my house have no idea whose house I'm in, whose house they are in the first place. And so the thought that Jesus, that God supports the downtrodden, protects the stranger, helps the orphan and the widows, and blocks the path of the ungodly, that for God, pure and undefiled religion is to visit the orphans and the widows in their suffering. That reminds me that while this country may have forgotten whose house they are in, they may have forgotten this grandmother that they locked up in the bedroom years ago, God has not forgotten. And God comes up the stairs, enters into this bedroom, and sits down and develops relationship and has fellowship and builds a friendship with this woman in her house. And so to me, that gives me tremendous hope for my people.
The first article says, our only unity of basis is in Jesus Christ. And you see, if the Belhar, after that second article, had gone on in its own context to say something like this, this means that the practice in the Dutch Reformed Church of South Africa from the 1850s on to permit and then even to encourage division along racial lines at the table of the Lord, so that in order to not offend the weaker brothers, that was the argument, those who don't want to sit at the table of the Lord with people who are not white-skinned, that is a grievous sin, that is contrary to the gospel. We'd be very clear, that's an ecclesiastical judgment that is calling a sin in the church a sin and saying no. But then to extend that now to the political arena, I think gets us into a morass of all kinds of complications and complexities that I don't think we can get out of. Why are we importing into the church the same entanglements with which the world around us is entangled and can't seem to get out of?
I think it can be easy as Christians in the culture that we live in today to think that we've done our part. We've led a good Christian life if we have focused on our own personal piety, if we are remaining pure from sexual sin, and if we are giving 10% to the church, and if we're doing a good job of praying and doing personal devotions, that's sort of where the Christian life begins and ends. And I think what the Belhar Confession helps me to understand is that Scripture speaks with a very loud voice when it comes to the issue of justice, that we as Christians are called not only to our own personal piety and our own personal relationship with Jesus Christ, but we are also called to look out at a world that's very much broken and that's very fraught with injustice. And we are called to be part of what God is doing in the world to right those wrongs.